Buddy, you weren't at school. What have you been doing all day?
I overslept. Look, I need your help. I have to ask Lorraine out, but I don't know how to do it.
All right, okay, listen, keep your pants on. She's over in the cafe. Got it, honey. What made you change your mind, George?
Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain.
Yeah, well, let's just keep this brain melting stuff to ourselves, okay?
Oh, yeah.
All right, okay. All right, there she is, George. Now just go in there and invite her.
Okay, but I don't know what to say.
Well, just say anything, George. Say, well, whatever's natural. Well, the first thing that comes into your mind.
Nothing's coming to my mind.
Jesus, George, it was a wonder I was even born.
What?
Nothing. Look, tell her destiny brought you together. Tell her that she is the most beautiful girl you've ever seen in the world. Girls like that stuff. What are you doing, George?
I'm writing this down. This is good stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Oh.
Let's go.
Oh.
You take care of that.
Lou, give me a milk. Chocolate.
Sherry Coke.
Lorraine, my density has brought me to you.
What?
Oh, what I meant to say was...
Wait a minute. Don't I know you from somewhere?
Yes, I'm George McFly. I'm your density. I mean, your destiny.
1, 2, 3. Marchy McFly, Marchy McFly. Marchy McFly is Marchy McFly. Marchy McFly is Marchy McFly. Every day in March I'll be doing the same thing, watching my favorite movie. Back to the Future once a day all month long. 31 straight days for me. Great Scott, this is heavy. It's called Marchy McFly. Follow along with my podcast. Did I mention there's a podcast? It's called Marchy McFly. Won't you please check out my podcast? Please just subscribe to my podcast. It's called Marchy McFly. The podcast is called Geek Mentality, but this is called Marchy McFly.
Hold it, fellas. I'm afraid you're just too darn loud. Next, please. Where's the next group, please?
It's day 11, everybody. Day 11 of Marchy McFly this morning, early this morning. I watched Back to the Future for the 11th time this month. Did it before work again. And all day I thought, well, I'll get this recorded early. I'll do this early. I'll get it out. And here we are. It's 9:15 p.m. And I'm just recording now. But what I thought I would talk about today is one person. Not George McFly, but the man behind George McFly, Crispin, which isn't his name, Crispin Glover. Hellion? even his middle name is like, okay, this guy is eccentric. He was born in April 20th, 1964 in the Big Apple, which I actually know is code for New York City. He is the son of a retired dancer. I say this, I think his mother is no longer with us. She was a dancer who retired right after he was born. Her name is Marion Elizabeth Lillian Betty Krejci. That's all one person. And actor Bruce Glover, his father, who had been in like so many different things. He is a guy that you've probably seen, but you didn't know it. Like he was in Diamonds and Forever. I think he was an assassin in that. Chinatown, and a hell lot of TV shows. And I definitely have seen him in at least an episode of Facts of Life, Dukes of Hazzard, A-Team, Benson, Murder, She Wrote, Chips, Barney Miller. Just your quintessential working actor. He's 88 years old now, but if you look at him on, 88. If you look at him on IMDb, he has the hair of a young Gerardo. I can't, maybe the hair is his, but the color, that would be remarkable if he still had that luscious hair. He actually looks like an older George McFly with like rock star dad hair. I don't know. It just looks like, I wish, like he looks like he conditions. But this isn't about Bruce Glover. This is about Crispin Glover. Crispin actually started acting at the age of 13, and he was in a bunch of little sitcoms. You may have heard of them. Now, he looks older in these clips. I was going to play these clips, and I realized that's too much work for a lot of it. He has just a couple lines. He was in Happy Days, but it was the Roger years. Richie's already gone, and they bring in Roger, and Fonzie didn't have a beard yet, but I feel like we were getting there. And yes, Crispin Glover was even in an episode of Family Ties. He played one of Alex P. Keaton's friends. They went to a bar with fake IDs to pick up on some women. His first movie was My Tutor, which is one of those movies that I've always known as an 80s kid, but I've never seen. But that led to him being in Teachers, which not until I was looking this up did I remember that he was in that. I remember seeing that movie as a kid, and all I remember is someone naked running down a hall, Nick Nolte, and the dude from Empty Nest who played a guy who wasn't actually a teacher, who just kind of stumbled in and became a substitute teacher. And it always reminded me because in my high school growing up, it was like not while I was there or while my brother was there, but like I think my friend's brother, in some yearbook, there's a picture of a guy who was a teacher for years, but he didn't actually have a degree. He faked it. And it always made me think of this movie, Teachers. But anyway, Crispin Glover, and I didn't even, once I saw it, I had a flashback of, oh my God, he was the student who bit the teacher on the hand. And I remember that, and I hadn't thought about that in so many years. But also in 1984, he was in Friday the 13th, the final chapter. You remember that? That was the last Friday the 13th movie. Part 4, the last one, before they made Part 5, and then 6 and 7, The New Blood, 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Then we had Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, where Jason is frozen and goes to the future, Freddy vs. Jason, and then, of course, the reboot. None of this has to do with Crispin Glover, but I just like the fact that he was in the final chapter, which is, 30, almost 40 years ago. 37 years ago now at this point. Yikes. But anyway, and I love that movie. That's why I bring it up. And he's like, one of those camper kids who, they show up to camp. They show up to drink, smoke, fornicate, partay, and eventually get brutally slaughtered. He is one of those who will ultimately meet his demise at Jason Voorhees' hand. But he has an amazing dance scene in it that you should look up on YouTube immediately. It wasn't until the next year that he had his really big breakout role as George Phineas McFly. I just made up that middle name. I have no idea. And I just can't believe I said idea instead of idea. I'm from Massachusetts. I should not be adding R's to the end of words. But anyway, Yes, he was in that movie. You know the movie, the one with the DeLorean and the doctor and the Alex P. Keaton. What is it in Stranger Things? It's like, that's the movie where Alex P. Keaton makes out with his mom. Anyway, after that movie, he was not in either sequel. He was recast by some, we've talked about this before. I think the actor's name is Jeffrey Weissman. I didn't write that down in my notes. Really, most of this is coming off Wikipedia and YouTube and memory. But I did find an interest. So he was not in it. Wikipedia says there was a contract dispute. They couldn't come to terms with the contract, which is like kind of not factually incorrect, but I feel like it's really just glossing over things. And in 2013, Crispin Glover was on the old Opie and Anthony show on Sirius XM radio. And he talked about the contract. He talked about the use of another actor and how he had a lawsuit. And he also talked about how something about the script. He didn't like the Back to the Future script and how it ended. And I have a few clips from that interview.
Back to the Future, it was actually very informative to me in some of the things that I'm talking about in terms of propaganda. I know it's a very beloved film, but I was only in the first film. There was they had taken the molds of my face from the old age makeup from the original film and put another actor into prosthetics that were made from my face. And then interspliced a very small amount of footage of me from the original film in order to fool audiences into believing that I was in the movie. Because of my lawsuit, there are rules in the Screen Actors Guild that make it so producers can never do something like that again. I'm proud of the lawsuit, but the reason I bring it up is because the reason that I didn't end up being in the film, it's more complex than this, but I was asking questions that the producer's director didn't like. I was a serious actor as well, so when I started actually analyzing the screenplay, once we were involved in the project, I had questions about things. And there was a different end. I won't go into so many details about it, but I had questions about it, and it did get changed. And I think there are other people that had questions because there are things in it that could, particularly in this day, be thought of as, offensive. And those changes happened. It had to do with money and what people were doing, the characters were doing with money. But I didn't stop with it. I said to Robert Zemeckis, I thought, it was not a good idea for our characters to have a monetary reward because it basically makes the moral of the film be that money equals happiness.
So hearing him talk about how the George character was reused and recast, that all makes sense to me. You could see a producer and director just kind of like, well, we got to put this together. We have to have the character in there. And they hit it enough. You know why they hit it enough? Because he was this is me thinking it. He was so good and this guy wasn't, and there was no way to get someone to be as good enough that they just hit it. I never thought it was him. I feel like maybe I knew it wasn't, but I never thought it was him. But using his likeness in the film, they did use some video clips, some clips, some footage. And I guess, they did it without paying him. I don't know, but it feels like something where his lawsuit did help with the Screen Actors Guild. So that part makes sense. The part where he loses me a little is talking about the script and the ending, and I don't like the fact that the family is, using monetary money to propaganda. And he talks about it would help corporations get behind the movie to push that money is happiness. And I think it was Anthony, one of the interviews, that said, well, I mean, because they said, why shouldn't they just be closer? And it's like, well, you see they're closer, and maybe because they're closer, they achieved more. There's all these ways to look at it, but at the same time, George McFly, Crispin Glover, you are a hired actor, hired to be in a movie, your maybe third movie, fourth movie, at least based on Wikipedia, your fourth movie, maybe more. I'm sure it was more. But, you're dealing with a director who's already done a couple things, and Steven Spielberg, possibly the biggest name in Hollywood, behind the lens at this point in the 80s. I remember seeing the DVDs, something where like he was a pain, and I can see it now. Like, do you think Leah Thompson said, "Do you really think I should be staring at him this much? It makes me think of him as a piece of meat." That's exactly what you're doing. Like, I don't want to say do the role, because it's okay to ask questions, I suppose. And he the way he makes it sound like he got the story changed. He went on to say like Biff wasn't the original person to help them, and like, well, I mean, I could talk about it someday in a book. I don't know. This was 8 years ago. I'm still waiting to hear that. I'm not trying to dissuade him. I'm not trying to disparage him. I'm just saying that there's always two sides, and he has his side, and they have their side, and he's probably right on a lot of things, and they're probably right on a lot of things. But what was interesting was he said, that he said that Bob Gale lied, and I'm not going to play the whole interview. He said that Bob Gale lied on their show. He was on the same Opie and Anthony show and said that Crispin Glover was asking for the same amount of money as Michael J. Fox, and then he was like nonchalantly, kind of insulting him, saying, well, Robert Zemeckis never said anything. It's not him. Bob Gale, he never really did much in Hollywood after that. So his whole thing is Back to the Future. And so he makes most of his money off of it. So that's him complaining there. But he said that what he did ask, what he was getting, I think he said he was getting half or less than half than what Leah Thompson and Tom Wilson were getting, and what he called were comparable roles. I don't know, because we don't know. All I'm going off of is what I saw in Back to the Future 2, which was he was just in the background and barely used, and his character was, killed off screen and then brought back off screen and all these things. But it could have been so much more. Maybe it would have been. Like, that's the worst thing, that if they could have got along, I mean, the movie probably would have been, part 2 probably would have been so much better. But I just thought that was interesting. I wanted to mention that and play that. But again, that's Crispin Glover's most iconic role, right? He did go on to still act, and he still acts today. He went on to, like, I thought he was just going to, when I looked him up, I was like, oh, he just did like weird movies that I never heard of. Like I remember he did Willard, and I thought, wow, Willard's almost 20 years old. That's a remake. Then all of a sudden, this guy who is this eccentric guy who doesn't want to do propaganda movies, plays the bad guy in the Charlie's Angels movies. So, it said it had been written with a speaking role. Wait a minute, he didn't speak at all? The character had initially been cast as a speaking role, but Glover, noting the lines as written or exposition, convinced the producer to eliminate the lines to create a more precise image of the character. My character in Charlie's Angels shouldn't talk. I don't know. That just annoyed me right there. Yes, because those movies are very, very artsy movies. And here's the thing. I didn't know he was in the 2007 Beowulf. He voiced a monster in it, and he played the part through performance capture technology. And hello, that was directed by Robert Zemeckis. So I feel like he and Zemeckis are either okay or they're okay enough. The last time I saw him in something, he was the one-armed bellman in Hot Tub Time Machine, which was funny, and I remember him being funny in it. The guy has the chops. He's very talented. It's just he's like a weirdo. Like he's a weird dude. I'm not even gonna play his music. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't even want to talk about him anymore. I'm here celebrating this movie for the month, and the first actor I talk about, I'm bringing him on to kind of badmouth the movie. This is not what I wanted to do. So it says he's made music. Have you ever heard of his music? No. He's written between 15 and 20 books. Have you heard of any of them? No. He's just a dude who likes to create and creates things, and he creates weird things. And he's been on, like, he was on Letterman back in 1987 to promote River's Edge. But he showed up in character for an unreleased movie, and he was wearing platform shoes and a wig, and he was just very, very weird. It was not even a movie that was released for another 5 years or 4 years. I wanted to at least give him his due and talk a little bit, play that audio of him from talking about Back to the Future a bit, but it doesn't feel right. So I don't want to give him. A, I don't want to talk about anything negative about this movie anymore, and B, I don't want to go back and redo this episode. So this is what you got. We nailed it. The 11th day of the month. Mr. Crispin Glover, George McFly. No matter what happens, here's where I have to realize something. You have to separate the man from the movie, because here's this gentle, pushover, loving dad, who, is doing better in his life because he stood up to the bully. And I don't need to hear this like young guy being like, I don't think this is the way to go. And he makes it seem like he changed things. I'm getting into it again. I don't want to badmouth it again. But I have to realize that just because the guy is a sweetheart on screen, maybe he is a pain in the ass off screen. They can't all be Michael J. Fox on and off screen. And again, this is me completely assuming that Michael J. Fox is wonderful off screen as he is on screen. But I just imagine like Doc being like, why 88 miles per hour? That would be promoting speeding. We don't want children driving 88 miles per hour trying to go back in time. I think we should change this as propaganda for big gas guzzling and DeLorean cars. And yeah, I've run out of steam. Can you tell? Not that I've run out of steam for this month, but this has been a long, long day. And I'm done. But I'm only done for today. We get to do this all over again tomorrow. But before I leave the Crispin Glover talk, I do want to mention that the last thing I saw on Wikipedia, it says, in an interview in 2011, Back to the Future co-star Michael J. Fox talked about the incident with Crispin Glover on Letterman. And he just said, Crispin isn't crazy, just excitable. That is Michael J. Fox being diplomatic. He's probably like, I don't have to deal with this wacky guy as my dad anymore. I hate even thinking that, because, God, when you see him dressed for the prom, or for the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, he just looks so happy. So you know what? I'm going to live in the bubble where George McFly is a happy guy and falls in love with the girl of his dreams, and they live happily ever after until the alternate timeline. But that's a different movie for a different time. I'm living in 1955 and 1985, in 1985, 36 years later. And at this point, I realize I'm not even sure I'm making sense. So with that, I'm going to leave you. But I'm going to leave you quietly, because I don't want to be loud, because I was too loud last night. So I'm just going to say it like this. Everybody, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Geek Mentality. You can find the Facebook page is Fans Not Experts. And the website, of course, is fansnotexperts.com. It's a rarely seen website. You should click on it once in a while. You'd be surprised what you see there. Because you've never been there before. Waka waka. Oh, and anyway, here's my theme song. This is my podcast. I made it. Geek Mentality's what I named it. And I think you should listen and subscribe. 'cause I'm kinda funny and awesome. I think that I'm worth your time, and I'm kinda handsome. My mom says, please listen and please subscribe. At least listen to this episode.
Fans not experts.
What are you looking at, butthead?